Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Much Talk About Nothing, our Batman Gate investigative special. As always, I'm your host and lead investigator, Grant Ingram, and today is a weird one. We are bringing you the latest information about a scandal you haven't heard of yet. If that sounds different, then tune in. The rest of this will be too. So, what is Batman Gate? Batman Gate is a campaign started by former DC Comics penciler Chris Wozniak. Wozniak claims that the Batman director Matt Reeves and producer Michael Uslan actively plagiarized a story that Wozniak wrote in 1990 and submitted to Michael Uslan around 2007. Is there evidence to back up these claims? I mean, Wozniak has the evidence with documentation of the timeline of his original story, or at the very least, a file from 2011 containing a retype of it. And he also has a comprehensive list of the differences and similarities between his story and the Batman. But that presents a unique problem in that, in order to empirically prove that the story was stolen, he must prove that Matt Reeves intentionally plagiarized his story after receiving it from Michael Uslan, which requires proving that Michael Uslan read it, liked it, and then gave it to Reeves to base his story off of, either with Reeves intentionally violating his professional integrity or not knowing that Mr. Wozniak hadn't been paid. Mr. Wozniak presents a variety of evidence to show that the two films are similar. In Wozniak's plot, the Batman's at the end of his career, and in the Batman is at his beginning of his career. And those two things are different, but they're not different enough. They're rewrites, essentially, according to Mr. Wozniak. So he was told that the end of career Batman was too old and too global. And then when they reboot it, all of a sudden he's at the beginning of his career. He had a criminal banking conglomerate. And then he that was reworked into an organized crime syndicate. Same thing, same story purpose, as he says here at the bottom of this slide, or identical story function, if you will, but renamed. And it keeps going on and on and on and on and on. And there's a biblical plague, a biblical flooding. Like, it's all the same according to Mr. Wozniak. But I had questions. And as I always do when I have questions, I called him. I reached out to Mr. Wozniak after hearing his story, and he graciously agreed to come on. Before recording, he assured me that he did not need notes and that everything he was sharing was true as he presented it. At first, I was skeptical, but while I was talking to him, it became clear that he really believes what he is saying, regardless of whether or not it is true or not. More on that later. Now for the interview. But first, let me tell you about Manscaped. Support for Much Talk About Nothing is brought to you by Manscaped. Manscaped is the best in men's below the waist grooming. Their products are precision engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped's Performance Package is the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join over 6 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer just for you: 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code MuchTalk at manscaped.com. And if my math is correct, that means that about 12 million balls are using Manscaped. The Performance Package 4.0 has arrived, and it is a game changer. Inside this package, you'll find their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, the Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, the Performance Boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold your goodies. Your Manscaped goodies, not your Manscaped goodies. And that Lawnmower 4.0 is like the best trimmer ever. It absolutely helps with the nicks. It helps with all of the little issues that you have. It's waterproof. It is fantastic. It is going to help you get rid of your nicks, your cuts, your scrapes, everything. Ingrown hairs, it helps reduce those. Doesn't completely eliminate it, but it will help reduce it drastically. And then their fourth generation trimmer, it features a cutting edge ceramic blade, which reduces grooming accidents. I've literally held my thumb up to it as it's going and no issues whatsoever. And then they throw in like two free gifts, which are their boxers and the Shed travel bag. And I will tell you, their boxers are the most comfortable underwear I've ever worn. And while that might be an embarrassing thing to admit on a podcast, it's true. They are fantastic. And that travel bag has come in handy already. And I've only had it for about 3 weeks. It is fantastic. And I cannot recommend it enough. So go and get 20% off and free shipping with the code MuchTalk at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code MuchTalk. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the jewels with Manscaped. And now to the interview.
So, Mr. Wozniak, do you mind kind of going through and telling us the similarities, the story, how this all came to pass?
Yeah, I mean, what we are talking about here is the plot that I wrote ages ago and that I submitted to DC Comics, several times over the years, and all the way up until like about 2017. And I was still, randomly pitching it to other DC artists and Batman. It was one of those stories where, every time, if we were talking with other artists and writers and stuff like that, if they mentioned, like a project coming to an end, I throw it out there as like, I've got this Batman thing we never did. It's really great. Are you interested? And, I did that multiple times over the years, but also, I first pitched the DC Comics at the Batman office way back in 1990 when I first wrote it. I pitched it to Archie Goodwin. And after Archie passed away, I pitched it again via email to the Batman office in about 2002. And then again, on and off and this is also a plot, mind you, that like I used to just hand out as a writing sample, trying to get, writing gigs. Cause, I was kind of known for penciling and I was trying to move into writing because that's really easier for me. I like writing. Penciling for me is hard work. It doesn't come natural. I'm not the world's best penciler, but writing is, especially comic books, it just comes easy. It's one of those things where, I prefer to write than to draw. And, I was trying to make that transition. But, but the issue here that we're talking about is in 2008, I met Michael Uslan, who's the producer of the Batman films. And he approached me at New York Comic Con at the Javits Center, 2008. And I was going to publish a comic book called Barren Soil. I had printed up 1,000 copies just to, hand out as samples and stuff like that. And I had a banner with the logo really large behind me and everything. So he came to my booth and he said, I really like the title of your book. I'm a film producer. I'm always looking for good stories. Do you mind if I have a copy? And of course I gave him one. I didn't recognize his name or anything, but, film producer, hey, I like your story. Let me take a look at it. Of course, you give him a copy. And, he also, he had a small stack of books under his arm. So, I presume that, he had asked quite a few people for copies of their books, just looking for stories and stuff like that. But he told me I'm always looking for good stories and he gave me his card, and I didn't recognize his name right away. But, after the convention, I went home and I Googled his name and I saw he was the producer of the Batman movies. And I had this unused Batman plot that, I always thought was great. Everybody always liked it. We just never got it done. It was one of those projects. So, it was a killer project. So I sent it to him. I was like, I've got this, great Batman story. And we never got around to doing it at DC, but it'd make a killer Batman flick, and that is, essentially it. I mean, after that, I didn't hear from him. So I didn't, nothing really developed. I still, kicked it around, tried to get it, other guys involved every once in a while. If it came up, they were looking for a project, and then I saw the movie on HBO, and it's my plot, the Riddler story, at least. Very, I just want to clarify, we're only talking about the Riddler story in the film, nothing to do with the subplots with Catwoman or Penguin. Just the main story, and the Riddler storyline is the main plot of the film. But that's what we're talking about.
So you say it's your plot. Can you kind of go into some specifics on that? Are there things that stick out?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's soup to nuts, my plot. It's just all been, if you take my plot and and all they did with it was, it was make it into a young reboot. And, and I chronicle this, painstakingly. It's, the videos go into it in pretty good detail, but, every single, change is literally for the exact same purpose. It's just they're going to do a young reboot. Everything has to take place in Gotham City. And so those are the rewrites that match across the board in every instance, and there's none that don't fit. And, because the original plot that I wrote, I initially wrote it to be, I was 26 when I wrote it, and I wrote it to be a sequel to Frank Miller's Dark Knight. I thought, I'll just come in with this killer story. Everybody would be excited about it, and we'll get to do this, great thing. And, Archie Goodwin, who was the Batman editor at the time, he's the guy I gave it to. And, I had to pester him for 2-3 weeks to get him to read it. But, one day he approached me in the office. I was in the office catty corner from him. And, he came over and he was like, did you write that story? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, did you write that by yourself? It's your story? I was, yeah, it's my story. I wrote it. And he thought it was great. But, he thought it was too big because I was young. I didn't have a reputation or anything, and he just thought that Paul and Jeanette, who ran DC Comics, they were the publishers. He was like, they're never going to let you do this. It just won't happen. And he said, if you were Frank Miller, we'd let you do this tomorrow, And, at the time, I'm trying to transition into writing, but I didn't know how to push for that. I didn't know how to kind of say, well, look, I'm just looking to write it, get someone else to draw it. I didn't go into that. And I just let it, lie because that's what he told me. So, that's where it's at. And, I didn't, and I just found out actually, literally, I think yesterday when I posted, I put it on Twitter that a friend of mine who in those days he was, a good friend of mine, but he also did assistant work for me. And then, penciled a few books at Marvel under his own name. We wrote another Batman story apparently that we pitched to Archie, and I think I haven't got, he sent me the cover sheet, but I haven't read it yet, but he's going to send me the whole story. But it's, I think the idea behind that was, okay, that, my first plot was too big. Let's do something a little more toned down and see if we can, get something going. Because, we are talking like, in 1990, early 90s, like everybody wanted to work at the Batman office. Everybody wanted to, contribute or, get something going with it. It was after the Keaton movie, Batman was, the comic book world for a little bit, so we all wanted to get down with it. And so, and also, just my friend Pete, he was a super Batman fan. He was like, and everybody loves Batman, but he was like, and so he was like, come on, let's do another one. So apparently we wrote a whole second story that I forgot about, that I'll be able to read soon.
So just to make sure I'm clear on this. So there's the story that they took for the Batman, and then there's a second one.
Right. Yeah, the second one has really nothing to do with this. It's just one of those, he's got an original. Well, the only thing that he has to do with this is that he found that second story. He's got an original copy from 1992, but he thinks he has an original copy of the 1990 plot too.
Okay.
So I'm just waiting. He says he's going to look for it. He went somewhere with his girlfriend. It sounded like a vacation or something. But as soon as he gets back, I'm going to pester him. And, but he thinks, he's got that 1990 copy, which obviously, there's plenty of proof, in other places in computer files and stuff like that, that the plot is as old as I say it is. That's a non-issue to prove that. But it would be nice to have an original copy, just to, a smelly old yellowed copy that, from then,
I do have to ask the devil's advocate question. Did you register the script anywhere? Is it a full script, or is it just kind of an outline?
It is a complete story. In typewritten pages, it's 10 pages. But in those days, we were all welcome to pitch whenever we wanted to. It's not, I don't know how it is today. I know they don't let people, or actually DC doesn't even have an office anymore, right?
They don't know what they're doing anymore. No.
Yeah. But in those days, you were freelancers that, if you were working up there and, kind of regular, you were welcome to just come in and browse the offices and talk to guys and show your art samples or your writing samples and stuff like that. So that was just normal. That's how things were. And but just to point out that in those days and still today and forever and ever, there's no such thing as a Batman story that's ever been published that doesn't have a contract attached to it with the writer. No one in DC has never ever published a Batman story that they didn't, when somebody brings something in and they go, okay, we like this, we're going to use it. There's always a contract in place. They never ever would dare, like publish something without a contract in place. It's because they don't own those stories. If somebody writes a story that has Batman in it, DC Comics knows they don't own that story at all. The writer controls the copyright to that story, and DC owns the trademark, which is the concept of Batman. So, and the way the law works, copyright law, is that the writer, let's say from me, for instance, I can't go out and use this Batman story and publish a Batman comic on my own because I would be violating their trademark, and they can't take my story and use it and without a contract in place and publish my story even though it has Batman in it, because they'd be violating my copyright. And that's how the law protects both sides. And so, just the act of showing something to someone doesn't mean anything. It's your story, you control it until you sign the rights over. And, that's how that works.
Right. And so as far as the, like you mentioned the court of law, are you planning on suing, or are you just planning on?
Well, I'm going to get legal representation. Obviously, at some point, I need that to sort this out. And to cross all the T's and dot the I's. So, but the thing is, we are talking about Warner Brothers, a multi-billion-dollar, the second biggest studio in the world. But even if we're just talking about Michael Uslan and/or Matt Reeves. We're talking about very, very wealthy guys, and to, bring lawsuits against these people, it's not something I could afford to do because, they'll kick it down the road and bleed you out in court fees and everything. So what I need, and any comic book artist in my position would need this, is I need a lawyer to come in and take the case on contingency, meaning he'll take a piece off the back end. So that's why, that's the whole point of going public, to raise awareness for all this and to attract the legal representation, but also secondarily to to call this out, and make sure that this doesn't happen to other people. And because this is a very, very common thing, Hollywood pilfering stories and concepts and everything from the comic book community, and those guys never get credited. And this is it's an old story.
Right. So you're not looking for funding directly from the public. You're just looking to raise awareness. Is that correct?
Well, if as far as I have a Patreon thing, there's an Indiegogo thing. If somebody, here's the thing: if somebody believes that they use my story, they didn't pay me, and they want to contribute something, I'm completely open to that. That's fine. If they just want to talk about it, that's fine. I'm just trying to raise awareness. But as far as legal fees go, I'm going to need that lawyer that's going to come in and say, hey, I believe this, I'll come and I'll take a piece of this. And then, it would be nice, if they just did the right thing and go, oh, we fucked up, sorry, we'll fix this. But, we all know the odds of that are zero. And so, if you don't make a big public stink and, frankly, just embarrass them because the optics is so terrible, then they'll just ignore you forever.
Right. At the very least, if you raise enough awareness, they'll give you going away money. And
they'll offer that.
Right.
If it's
so,
but again, that's how this always goes. In every instance, they'll never admit guilt, but they don't pony up or anything unless there's a public outcry. So
right. Exactly. We saw that with the Snyder Cut. We've seen it over and over again. Right.
Yeah.
So I do have a couple of just questions that I've seen people ask just specifically about the script. So I've seen the YouTube videos. There's a slide where you have kind of the similarities listed out, and so one of them that I've been seeing that people are kind of using against your hashtag Batman Gate campaign is, so you talk about, so from what I understand, your story, it was an older Batman, it was more global.
Yes.
And then you say that's similar to the Batman, which is a younger Batman and focused in Gotham City. And
That's misrepresenting what that slide is. If you watch the video, I'm very clear. That's a list of the differences, and then I explain why the differences and that they're not differences, they're rewrites. And in every instance, every difference has a one-for-one parallel between my plot and the film that have an identical story function, and they are all fit into the exact same category of converting my story into a young reboot. Everything has to take place in Gotham. So if I had something that was a big global thing, it just got reduced to be a local event because they're doing a young Batman. So for instance, in my plot, there was, everything was kind of driven by global banking conglomerates that are, and in the actual film, they just converted that to be, localized organized crime syndicate. So it's stuff like that. But everything has a one, the differences all have a one-to-one parallel between the film and my plot, and they have the exact identical story function, and the stories, flow exactly the same and take, all the beats are the same, the character motivations are the same, and the turning points are the same, and the ending's the same. So I'm not saying that thing they're misrepresenting that. That's a list of the differences,
okay.
And then I show exactly why. If you wait another like 5 seconds in the video, then it's explained why the differences are different, and shows they purposely cut that out because they're not they're trolling, so.
Right, which is why I invited you on to begin with.
Yeah. There's been a lot of trolls this weekend.
I've seen my fair share of them. I had somebody respond to one of the tweets I sent at you, pretending to be you, and I'm like, huh, that's kind of disappointing. And then
today there was a second fake account we just found.
So it means you're doing something right. If people are coming after you.
If when they come out like this and they are out in full force, but I think it's kind of silly and ridiculous because if you don't believe my story, if you don't believe that that's my plot in the film, and I think I proved that in that second Batman Gate video, Batman Gate 2. But if you don't believe that, they're bringing all kinds of attention to this that I can never generate on my own. So I don't care. Let them hate all you want, make videos, bring your friends, yell and scream. They're just bringing more attention to it, and then people with common sense who just watch the videos, convincing most of them. So
right,
I'm fine with that.
Right, and one of the things I think that we've accomplished here is you presented it all in a short, easy to digest, video. Or can we expect a third YouTube video to kind of once you get that?
Yeah, I might have the third Batman Gate video was I was planning on doing. It's going to be dull, but it's just going to be a documentation of proving how old the plot is and when it was sent out and who's seen it, all that stuff. It's not going to be an exciting video. But I may have to do, a couple of shorter videos, in between because there's some other things I want to say, and just to point out, how this affects people that are working class people in comics. You have these mega millionaires in Hollywood that just pilfer stuff, and it's just not right. And there are guys that are, lots of guys that this happens to. This has been going on since probably, I'm sure, before I came in. But even when I first started working in comics, I think I was in 1986, and I think that's when RoboCop dropped. And, so much of that was taken from Howard Chaykin's American Flag. And, he completely went uncredited and didn't make a nickel from it. And, it's just stuff like this. This is a very, very common story. But, I didn't feel like eating it. I was like, this is bullshit. I'm not going to, sit around and just let this go. And so, I'm going to make a stink. And if they have an answer for it, I'd love to hear it. I'm more than happy to go on any podcast with Uslan or Reeves or both of them or whatever. I don't need notes. I don't need anything. I think I can prove my case. I would love to hear what they have to say. But that's all there is to it. I just don't think if somebody, steals your story, there's no other word for it. They took it. They took my name off and put someone else's name on it. So that's stealing, and then they go out and make all this money. These guys are doing their victory laps and claiming credit and everything. That's my daughter's college fund, and that's the paying off the mortgage and all. you know, the real world consequences for people that are working, you know, and there's no reason for it because they can afford, you know, what was the budget for that film? It's $200 million. They could have paid me off, you know, it's crazy.
Right.
But they,
oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, no, I'm just saying, it's like, I just don't understand the temperament of a person that opts to use it and not credit somebody or pay them, you know, when they have the resources of, you know, the you know, a mega film studio like that. You know, it's just nuts.
I completely understand that. Thank you so much for coming on. That's kind of all the questions I had, but hopefully we can raise some awareness for you and at least let you get your day in court.
That would be great. I mean, I appreciate it. You know, I mean, that's all I can ask for is, you know, I'll answer any questions, but you know, if somebody, like, you know, believes it and spreads the word, I think that's important, you know, for other guys that get ripped off too. I mean, like I said, it's a regular thing. You know, they do it all the time. And, you know, people are like, well, what do you hope to accomplish? And they, you know, and I'll tell you, I said this yesterday to somebody. I said, you know what, right now, you know, even if I don't get paid a penny, we accomplish something, because I can guarantee you Matt Reeves or Michael Usland will never again, you know, have this thought in their mind that they can do this. So that's two guys at least we put a stop to. But I think we should just, you know, make this known so that nobody does it, because it's crazy. You know, there's no reason to do it. You know, guys in comics are hardworking guys. You know, it's they deserve the credit when the credit's due.
I 100% agree with you there, and I hope you have your chance to prove it.
Mr. Wozniak, I couldn't help but wonder, is it possible that he believes what he's saying, but it's just not true? And after some further thought and investigation, I believe that it is. It is simply that it is simply possible that he wrote the script, wrote the story, submitted it. Everything he says is true, but it just wasn't used, and it's complete coincidence. If you look at the stories that the Batman was supposedly based on, No Man's Land and Year One, they all kind of, it makes sense. Everything that was done makes sense. Even with Zero Year, with the Riddler kind of restarting Gotham, you can see where it all came from. However, it is close enough, similar enough to where I think that Wozniak should have been paid some kind of going away money. But, and to see if he will be, I guess we'll have to wait until he can prove that day in court. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you would like to follow us, you can subscribe here on YouTube or on Spotify. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at MTAN Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at Must Talk About Nothing. You can send us an email at musttalkaboutnothing@gmail.com. And until next time, I'm Grant, for the Grant who isn't here. And we'll see you then.